Hello, Giants fans, and welcome to a new edition of the Valentine's Views podcast here on Big Blue View Radio, part of your SB Nation family of podcasts. Please like, share, and subscribe if you're watching us on YouTube, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts across the Big Blue View Radio network. All right, your 5-9 Giants are getting ready for a Christmas Day game against the Philadelphia Eagles, getting ready for their final stretch of the 2023-2024 season. And here to help me talk about some of the storylines for the Giants over the next 3 weeks, leading into what's sure to be a very interesting offseason, is good friend Patricia Traina of Locked On Giants and Giants Country. Patty, how you doing? How you feeling these days?
Feeling a lot better after tangling with COVID for a couple of weeks, but I'm back. And just, here we are. Let's do it.
Yep. And you and I, you've been sick. I've been sick a little bit. I'm standing up to do this show because my back is killing me. I think 2 weeks of coughing has destroyed my back. And so we're both still playing hurt a little bit, but so
we're also both getting old.
You had to remind me, didn't you?
I
had
did.
to remind me.
I did. Sorry.
That's all right. One of these days I'll realize that I'm old and I'll retire, but not quite yet, Patty. Not quite yet. You're not rid of me quite yet.
Who would I bust on if you retired? Seriously,
I don't really.
You're older than I am. Who would I have to bust on?
I don't know, because Tom Canavan from AP, who's older than both of us, he's probably going to retire first.
Yeah, so, I guess I could always bust on Tino.
Well, yeah, but what fun is that?
Yeah, you're right. It's too easy.
Yeah, that's true. Anyway, Patty, let's talk Giants. Let's talk storylines for the rest of the year, last 3 weeks of the season. And that, of course, the storylines start, of course, with Tommy DeVito. And, Brian Daboll said the other day that DeVito will remain the starter, said he's earned the right to remain the starter. And I agree wholeheartedly with that decision. There's really no point at this point in doing anything other than starting Tommy DeVito. My question, do you agree with that decision? And when you look at DeVito, everybody wants to know, what can he be? What is he? What can he be? Can he be a QB1? Can he be just a good QB2? I don't see QB1. I see the possibility of a QB2. I see a guy that can stick around on a roster for a while. I'm just curious if you agree with the decision and what you see at this point, for the possibilities with Tommy DeVito.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with the decision. It's been obvious now for a while that, and if you listen to, Daboll and a few weeks ago, Joe Shane, and it's pretty obvious that they're going to move on from Tyrod Taylor, who was the QB2 prior to his injury. So in DeVito, you've got somebody who is younger, who doesn't cost as much as Taylor would cost, and who's got some talent, who's got some, things that they can develop. Now, is DeVito a finished product? No, not even close. He still needs to show that he can load the team up on his back and carry them across the finish line. Now, people will say, well, he did that against the Packers, but also he had the benefit of a strong defensive performance, which helped. Last week against the Saints, the defense basically, not as effective as it had been during the 3-game win streak. And, what happened? The offense just kind of fell apart. So that being said, in DeVito, I do think he has potential to be a QB2, but also remember that Joe Shane said that they're going to address the quarterback, whether it be in the draft, whether it be in free agency, whether it be, this probably unlikely, but they could even maybe look to get a trade. Who knows? But they are going to add to that position. They're going to have to because of the uncertainty with Daniel Jones and when he might be ready to go. And then depending on what they do, where does that leave DeVito? Does that put him at QB2? Does that put him back at QB3? Does that make him the odd man out? There's a lot that needs to be sorted out. And DeVito in these last 3 games can basically help to answer some of those questions by, continuing to play pristine ball security type of ball and showing that he is capable of loading the team on his shoulders when they need to be carried across the finish line.
Right. I look at the Green Bay game, Patty, and even the Green Bay game, DeVito magic coming back, getting the game-winning field goal. Really, that came down to one throw. That was one throw. That was a really nice throw to Wan'Dale Robinson that covered 32 yards of catch and run. To me, DeVito still has a lot to prove. We've seen a lot of good things from DeVito. We've seen some warts in terms of how long he holds the ball and maybe a little bit of confusion when when he doesn't see what he thinks he's going to see on his first read. But maybe some of that's experience, and maybe some of that comes with snaps that he's going to get for the next 3 weeks. So that's another reason why it's good. Patty, before we get off the DeVito topic, I've been trying to come up with a comparison. Been trying to come up with a comp for DeVito. I thought about Gardner Minshew because of Minshew mania and those kinds of things. And it dawned on me today, maybe the comp is Taylor Heineke, who's now in Atlanta. He was with Washington for a while. Maybe because Heineke's a guy who came out of nowhere, played some good football, but he's made a career for himself as a backup. And maybe that's the comp. I mean, I don't think we know for sure yet, but that's the best one I've been able to come up with to this point.
Could you also maybe say Nick Foles, although Foles did kind of flame out a little bit there? Could we say Kirk Cousins when he was with Washington? I don't know.
Yeah,
I mean,
I think that would be the pipe dream. That would be the top end of the spectrum. I'm not ready to go there yet.
right,
I think
right.
that would be the dream,
Mhm.
but I'm not ready to go there yet. It just Heineke for me right now is the one I think that resonates the best. But we'll see.
Yeah.
I'm anxious to see what he does over the next few weeks. Patty, another guy we have to talk about, and we've talked about him a lot already this year. We have to talk about Evan Neal a little bit. I don't even know at this point if Evan Neal's going to be ready to play. We'll hear more from Brian Daboll on Wednesday. I don't know what the deal is with Evan Neal, and if they thought this ankle injury was this bad, why wasn't he placed on IR? Is a question
Mm.
that I have, which is pointless at this point. But is there, with 3 games to go, 2 of those against the Eagles? I would still like to see more from Evan Neal, but he's been out for so long. Is it even fair to him at this point to run him out there for a couple games?
This isn't gonna be a situation like with Dexter Lawrence, where Lawrence is on a pitch count coming off of the hamstring injury. If you're gonna play Evan Neal, I gotta think that you're gonna look to play him the whole game, and ideally not get into a rotation situation. Now, last week, if you notice, Brian Dable kind of punted on the answer when asked if Evan Neal was
Right.
healthy, would he go back in the lineup? Now, that could be because he figured at the time, why upset the apple cart? The offensive line was playing, halfway decent. And then, of course, they go out against the Saints and they lay, the goose egg that they did.
Mhm.
So, then you have more of a justification if you want to make a change to say, okay, we're going to put Evan Neal back in there. But here's the thing, Evan Neal, Joe Shane says he went back and looked at the tape and he saw Evan Neal as a tackle. That's old tape at this point. He
Mhm.
has not developed to where, you can say that he's no longer, hit or miss, so to speak. Now, is that on coaching? You can make that case. I mean, I've certainly made that case that, the Giants are drafting all these high, premium picks and outside of really Andrew Thomas, who was kind of established, who's really developed for the Giants on the offensive line, you know? And at what point do you say, okay, is it the talent they're bringing in or is it the coaching? So, you know, but with Evan Neal, at this point, he's not going to be 100%. You're going to put him out there and further ruin his confidence. I don't know that that's really the smart way to go. And as far as, you know, why didn't they put him on IR? I haven't quite understood this team's handling of injuries all year long with, you know, allowing guys to play injured, you know, case in point, when Andrew Thomas tweaked the hamstring early in the Dallas game, why not get him out of there right away instead of allowing him to make it worse? You know, the Graham Gano situation and so forth. So I don't understand that. I'd love an explanation behind the thought process there, but you know, what's done is done.
Yeah, it's been a strange year for the Giants in terms of decisions in a number of ways, Patty. And the only other thing I will say about Evan Neal is I'm sure that leading up to the draft, leading up to free agency, everyone will spend a ton of time saying, "Oh, he should be a guard," or you know, he needs another year at right tackle or whatever, and everyone will argue about that. And the only argument that I will make is when I look at it, whichever position that he plays next year, he can't walk into training camp day one with a job. I
No.
think he has to walk in there, whether he's at left or right guard or whether he's at right tackle, he has to walk into that situation with legitimate competition and earn the right to play.
I agree, and also I think the Giants, Joe Shane, Brian Dable, and whoever ends up coaching the offensive line, whether it's Bobby Johnson or someone else, they've got to be honest with themselves. You know, yeah, great. Go back and look at his tape from college, but also consider, how did he do when he played guard? Was he maybe better as a guard than a tackle? You know, don't say, "Oh, you know, we're gonna live and die with him at tackle just to save face because he was the 7th overall pick in the draft." I mean, that would be foolish. I mean, ideally, yes, you don't wanna draft a guy and then have to move him, but if he's not cutting it, it's not the end of the world. I mean, the Cowboys, you know, they did it with Zach Martin years ago. Zach Martin, I believe, was a tackle, and they moved him inside the guard, and he's been an all-pro at guard. So is it really that bad if you get a stud out of, you know, if you turn Evan Neal from a dud of a tackle into a stud of a guard? I don't think that's such a bad thing.
No, it's not. And I thought for years that was the mistake that the Giants made with Eric Flowers.
Mhm.
They drafted Eric Flowers to be a left tackle, and Jerry Reese was going to die on that hill that Eric Flowers was a left tackle, and he basically did die on that hill, you
Mhm.
know. And we found out afterwards, you know, in later years that Flowers played decently at guard for a couple of years. So maybe the Giants could have gotten something, out of Flowers if they had been willing to move him. And you hope they're not hard-headed about Evan Neal.
Yeah. I mean, they could just be saying that to, you know, not to dent the kid's confidence or, you know, to put any doubt in his head, you know, which is why I believe, you know, Brian Dable didn't waste any time appointing Daniel Jones to starter once he's healthy. Why put any doubt out there and, you know, discourage them in their rehab or whatever, you know? So sometimes there's some head games involved here. So, you
Mhm.
know, Evan Neal, look, he's a very I don't know how you find him, but I find him to be, you know, to have a sensitivity. You know, he's very, you know, sensitive. Doesn't necessarily mean he's soft, but you know, I can kind of see where maybe the coaching staff and Joe Shane don't want to, you know, be as upfront or blunt with their assessment at the risk of maybe undoing whatever it is they've done so far with him.
Yeah, not until they have to.
Right.
Patty, let's turn to looking at the final 3 games, and the reality of it is the Giants have played an extremely young roster all season long. You go by, I believe the stat is called snap-weighted age, and the only team in the league playing a younger roster than the Giants has been the Green Bay Packers. And yet, when you look at the last 3 games, I think you can argue that there are still some young players on this roster who maybe you would like to see a little bit more of. I think we can argue that there's not much point in pushing Dexter Lawrence to play 80 or 90% of the snaps at this point. He's not 100% healthy. He's been on a pitch count the last couple of weeks. So why continue to play him, or why try to push him, to play the 85 or 90% of snaps he would normally? And the other one is Saquon Barkley for me. The Giants in the middle part of the season, they rode Saquon really, really hard. And this past week, I think he only had 9 carries, and that was just, got to a point where the Giants just couldn't run, and the score dictated that they couldn't even try. But I don't know how much sense it makes to give Saquon any of those 25 or 30 touch games the rest of the way. So with that in mind, I'm just thinking, I've given my list at Big Blue View. I'm just curious if there are 3 or 4 young players who really haven't gotten a lot of time that you would like to see, get more time, based on the roster decisions the Giants have to make this offseason.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Eric Gray, so let's see what he can do. On the offensive line, what about Marcus McCaffin? He started earlier in the year and then he got benched. How far has he come along? Put
Mhm.
him out there. Could he be any worse at this point than the guards that they have out there right now? I mean, what do you got to lose? Defensively, DJ Davidson and Jordan Riley, 2 guys you definitely want to see more of. We haven't seen a whole lot of, I don't think at any rate, of Carter Coughlin on defense. He's been more of a special teams guy. Maybe Javarius Owens, who's been a healthy scratch basically all season long. See if you can't get him in there. So, yeah, I mean, and then if it means putting down Sterling Shepard for a game or 2, why not? I mean, you know what you got in Shepard, and I don't know if
Mhm.
he's even in the long-term plans. So, I would try and get some of these young guys in, but look, Brian Dable is always gonna try to play to win, and that means having the best available players in his estimation available for game day. So, as much as you and I may wanna see some of these younger players on offense and defense, I don't think they're gonna go that route. I mean, technically, the Giants are still mathematically alive for a playoff hunt. We know they're not gonna get it because they would need all kinds of funky things to happen for them to sneak into that consideration. But Dable is treating it like, they've got a chance, and they do technically, but, I don't see him saying, "Okay, you know what? I'm giving up, so I'm gonna just plug the young guys in and, you know, whatever happens, happens."
Mhm. No, at some point though, at some point you have to look at what's best for the future. And I do think at some point you have to say, we may have a hole at cornerback next year. So let's see how far Trey Hawkins has come. We may have a hole on the offensive line because who knows if Ashawn Robinson's going to be back, or if Raheem Nunez Roches, will be back next year. We may need to see more of these young guys. And as you said, can Eric Gray be part of a rotation at running back? Can he be the number 2 guy for Saquon, or do they still need to go find that guy? So, yeah, so it's an interesting balance, and you're right. Dable's going to try to win the games, and I can't blame him for that because he gets judged by wins and losses.
Yeah.
And nobody wants double digit loss seasons on their resume if they can help it. Nobody wants 5-12 on their resume if they can help it. So I don't blame him for that.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's the regular season. The time to experiment is always in the preseason, which is what they did. The problem is, now you're basically out of it. Um, it would be nice to see how these guys are coming along in live snaps. Now, the coaches will probably tell us, well, we see them in practice, so we know how they're coming along. But you and I both know that they cannot simulate game conditions, especially this time of year when padded practices are basically, they're rare. The
Right.
tempo is rare, the practices are the schedule is adjusted because of all these crazy, scheduling of the games. So what harm would it do to see what you've got and how far they've come along by putting them in game scenarios? But, I don't think they're gonna do it for the reasons I mentioned, and that is Dable's gonna try and play to win every single game.
Absolutely. Patty, let's just let me just throw one more thing at you. As you look at the next 3 games, is there anything else in terms of, playing time? We've talked about DeVito, we've talked about Neal, we've talked about some of the younger players. Is there anything else that you really want to see? Anything that will tell you, anything about the Giants going forward, over the final 3 weeks?
Well, I mean, they're facing the Eagles in 2 of the final 3 weeks, and despite the fact that the Eagles have had some problems, I think they've lost now, what, 3 in a row? They're still a
Mhm.
pretty darn good team. They're still, you could still make the argument that they're the cream of the crop in the NFC East. I would like to see the Giants in these last 3 games be competitive. If they're getting blown out like they were against the Saints, that's not good. That's the number of blowout games that the Giants have had this year, not good. That's a step backwards. So ideally, you want to see improvement as the season goes on. And while improvement is never linear, the Giants seem to be going backwards, and that's alarming. So I would like to see more competitiveness. I'd like to see fewer mistakes. The offensive line, I mean, it is what it is at this point. I don't know if they can get it any better, but certainly I'd love to see them pick up a stunt. I mean, I can't remember the last time they really did that on a consistent basis. So, just I wouldn't say dumb down the offense or the defense, but just be competitive. That's really all I want to see is them be competitive against some of these better teams. And like I said, the Eagles, despite the fact that they've been losing, they're still head and shoulders above the Giants at this point.
Right, and the Rams are in the middle of the playoff hunt
Yep.
as well. So 3 games that are all significant challenges for the Giants. And it would be nice if these games are not blowouts by the end of the first quarter,
Yeah,
which
exactly.
way too many Giants games have been blowouts by the end of the first quarter, or at least the end of the first half already this year. So I would agree with you on that. All
Yeah,
right.
for sure.
Yeah. All right, Patty. Fairly quick show today. So I think that'll wrap it up for us, Giants fans. Thank you as always for listening. Please stay safe out there. Take care of each other, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.